Welcome to Fog Street Mysteries, where every story begins in shadows and every clue glows under a single street lamp. Don't forget to share thoughts. Your feedback keeps the mystery alive. Now let's begin. Nero Wolfe and the Embassy Mirage, a Nero Wolfe Mystery, classic noir detective story. Chapter 1, A Visitor with No Country. I was filing receipts and trying to remember whether a man could reasonably eat 3 slices of Fritz's apple strudel without permanent damage when the doorbell rang. It was 5 minutes to 11, which in Nero Wolfe's house is not just late, it's suspicious. Wolfe didn't move. He never does, unless the bell rings at precisely the right time or the wrong emergency intrudes. This was neither. He sat in his yellow armchair like a large, immovable judgment, a book open in his lap, the white orchids behind him glowing softly under their lamps. The air smelled of damp soil, beer, and Fritz's last stand against cholesterol. "Archie," Wolfe said without looking up, "if that is another man selling encyclopedias, inform him that ignorance is not a condition I seek to remedy at this hour." "I'll break the news gently," I said, and went to the door. The man on the stoop didn't look like a salesman. He looked like a man who had practiced not sweating. Mid-30s, expensive dark suit, tie knotted with surgical precision. His hair was combed back in the international style, neither American nor European, which usually means someone has spent too much time being both. He smiled, and it was a good smile, professionally reassuring. "Mr. Archie Goodwin?" he asked. "That's me. You're late for dinner and early for breakfast. I must see Nero Wolfe. It's a matter of urgency." That was the first lie. Urgency shows. This man had ironed his. I let him in. Wolfe glanced up, took in the visitor in one comprehensive look, and frowned as if the man had offended him by existing. "You have 3 minutes, Wolfe said. And then you will leave." The man inclined his head. "I am Pavel Morin, cultural attaché to the Embassy of—" "Stop," Wolfe said. "Before you lie further." Morin stiffened. I leaned against the desk and watched. Wolfe didn't raise his voice, he never needed to. He simply applied intellect like pressure. "Your accent," Wolfe went on, "is not consistent. It drifts. Prague on certain vowels, Vienna on others, and occasionally Brooklyn when you grow irritated. That is not cultural, it is careless. Proceed with care." Morin swallowed. "Very well. I represent interests connected to an embassy." "Which embassy?" I asked. He hesitated just a beat too long. "A small one." Wolfe snorted. "Size is irrelevant. Truth is not." Morin reached into his inner pocket and produced a passport. Then, after a pause, another. He laid them side by side on Wolfe's desk. They were different colors. Different seals. Different countries. Same photograph. I whistled softly. "That's either a miracle or a felony." Morin's voice dropped. "A clerk at the embassy, officially a junior records officer, has disappeared. He discovered something he was never meant to see. And you have come to me," Wolfe said, "instead of the police, your superiors, or your conscience." "Why?" "Because if this reaches the embassy," Morin said, "someone will die." I felt a prickle along my neck. Wolfe didn't react, but his eyes sharpened. "Someone already may have," Morin added. That got Wolfe's attention. He closed his book with a deliberate finality. "Explain," he said. Morin did, badly, and with omissions you could drive a taxi through. The clerk, a man named Emil Varga, had access to shipping manifests and visa records tied to cultural exchanges. Art exhibits, visiting scholars, musicians, respectable enough. Varga had come to Morin with questions. Then he vanished. His apartment was untouched. His desk cleared. His name erased from internal schedules. "A man does not vanish," Wolfe said. "He is removed." Morin nodded. Yes. By whom? Morin spread his hands. That is what you must determine. Wolfe leaned back, displeased. You ask me to intervene in diplomatic affairs without clarity, compensation, or assurance of discretion. I decline. I opened my mouth to argue, mostly because I enjoy it, but Morin beat me to it. There is more, he said. The passports. Wolfe's eyes flicked to the desk. 2 more exist, Morin said quietly. Perhaps more. Identical faces. Different names. Different countries. The clerk found the pattern. And you? I asked. Which one are you? Morin met my eyes. The one that is still alive. That was enough for Wolfe. He hates melodrama, but he loves puzzles, and this one was humming. You will remain silent unless addressed, Wolfe told Morin. Then to me, Archie, you will investigate the embassy discreetly. Observe. Do not provoke. Report only facts. I grinned. Taxi or subway? Taxi, Wolfe said. Time matters. So does discretion. Morin exhaled in relief. Too much relief. I grabbed my coat and headed into the New York night, where the streetlights made puddles look like secrets and taxis cruised like sharks. The embassy sat in a converted townhouse, respectable brick, flag hanging limp as if tired of pretending. Inside, everything was polite and wrong. Too clean. Too quiet. A junior secretary, Miss Langer, answered my questions with her eyes darting toward the ceiling as if it might object. When I mentioned Varga's name, she went pale. He left, she said quickly. Back to Europe. Funny, I said. Nobody knows which Europe. Her hands trembled. I shouldn't talk. You already are, I said gently. She leaned closer. Records were altered. Names changed. Men came and went who didn't exist on paper. Emile said it was like a mirage, real until you touched it. Where is he now? I asked. She shook her head. If he was smart, he ran. If not. A door slammed upstairs. Footsteps. Miss Langer straightened, professional again. I must return to work. I left with more questions than answers, which is the usual exchange rate in my line of work. Outside, a black sedan idled across the street. Its engine purred like it knew me. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled, orchids watching like silent jurors. Diplomatic immunity, Wolfe said when I finished. A convenient curtain. And behind it? I asked. A stage, he said. With actors who change costumes but not faces. He reached for his beer. Mr. Morin, Wolfe said, you have not been entirely candid. But you have been sufficiently alarming. Morin stiffened. This investigation, Wolfe continued, will proceed. If your clerk is alive, we will find him. If he is dead, we will determine who killed him. But understand this, I do not tolerate mirages. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, the orchids glowed, and somewhere between truth and paperwork, a man without a country was either hiding, or already gone. I had a feeling this case was going to get ugly before it got clear. And with Nero Wolfe, that usually meant someone was about to learn that illusions don't survive daylight, or logic. Chapter 2, Diplomatic Shadows. If you've never tried to pry facts out of an embassy without getting your head politely removed, you're missing a special kind of entertainment. It's like attempting to pick a lock while the lock smiles at you and offers tea. The morning after Pavel Morin's little passport magic show, Wolfe was in his element, meaning he was exactly where he always is, planted in the yellow armchair as if it had grown around him. The orchids behind him gave off that faint wet green scent that always makes me think of money kept too long in a drawer. Fritz had delivered breakfast with the solemnity of a bishop, and Wolfe had judged the ham and eggs with the cold fairness of a Supreme Court justice. I stood by the desk with my coffee, waiting for my marching orders. Wolfe set down his fork. Archie, you will return to the embassy. I was hoping you'd say the dentist. You will not jest. You will observe. Today you will concern yourself with routine. Embassy routine is mostly lying and stamping paper. Precisely, Wolfe said. The stamps will be informative. I stared. You want me to steal a stamp? I want you to learn who has authority to apply one, Wolfe said, and sipped his coffee. And I want you to learn why a clerk can be removed from existence without notice. I nodded. And Mr. Morin? Wolfe's eyes flicked toward the chair where Morin had sat last night. It was empty now. Wolfe had insisted he sleep elsewhere. Wolfe doesn't like stray diplomats in his house any more than he likes stray cats. Morin will arrive after noon, Wolfe said. Fritz will not feed him until I am convinced he deserves it. That's how Wolfe expresses compassion. I went out into New York's late morning grind. The streets smelled like exhaust, wet stone, and yesterday's ambition. I caught a taxi, gave the driver the address, and watched the city slide past, brownstones like stern old faces, storefronts yawning open, people moving with that New York purpose that means, I'm late even when I'm early. The embassy townhouse looked the same in daylight, respectable brick, a flag limp as boiled lettuce. Inside, it was too quiet, as if even the dust needed clearance papers. The receptionist remembered me. That was bad news. When you're remembered in a place designed to forget people, you're already under a microscope. I'd like to speak to Miss Langer, I said. She's busy. The receptionist smiled with her lips only. Tell her Archie Goodwin is here with a message for her employer, I said, and gave her a look that suggested I might also have a message for her kneecaps. That did it. Within a minute, Miss Langer appeared, pale and neat, and led me through a corridor that had more doors than a hotel and less warmth. We stopped in a small office that smelled faintly of ink and fear. You shouldn't have come, she said. I get that a lot, I told her. Now, what happened after I left yesterday? Her eyes flicked to the window, then back. They questioned me. Who's they? She swallowed. Counselor Ribach. And Mr. Sorrell. Never heard of them, I said. You are not meant to, she said, and her voice had the shaky honesty of someone deciding whether truth is worth dying for. Mr. Sorrell is, security. I leaned on the edge of her desk. Did you mention our conversation? No, she shook her head quickly. But they knew I had spoken to you. They always know. That's comforting, I said. Listen, I'm looking for Emil Varga. Alive is preferable. Dead is acceptable if he left a forwarding address. She flinched. He is not here. I gathered. But he was here, and now he isn't. That's a change worth studying. Where did he work? She hesitated, then took a key from a drawer and opened a cabinet. She pulled out a thin folder, slid it toward me, and immediately regretted it. It's only a copy, she whispered. I made it before they removed his file. I opened it and glanced through. Sparse employment form, a photo that didn't match the name, too formal, too official, like a mug shot dressed for Sunday. There was a signature at the bottom, E. Varga. The signature looked practiced. Too smooth. You're shaking, I said. She shut her eyes. Because last night, a man came to my apartment. That put a little ice in my coffee. Did he knock? He let himself in. Her voice went thin. He said I should forget Emil. He said if I remembered him, I would join him. And you believed him? Yes. Describe him. Tall, she said. Clean-shaven. Pale eyes. He wore gloves. Inside? I asked. She nodded, and I filed it away. Gloves indoors are either a medical condition or a profession. Name? He did not give one. But I heard Counselor Ribok call him Sorrel once. I closed the folder and slid it back. Miss Langer, you're going to do something brave and stupid, you're going to pretend you never saw me. I can do that, she whispered. We pretend constantly. I stood. One more thing. Where are the manifests kept? Her eyes widened. Why? Because Wolfe asked me to care about stamps. She hesitated, then scribbled an address on a scrap of paper. A warehouse. West Side. All shipments come through there. Who controls it? Mr. Sorrel. Naturally. I left the embassy with the folder's details in my head and the uncomfortable sense that my spine had been added to somebody's inventory list. Outside, the black sedan from last night was parked half a block away, pretending to be scenery. It was doing a lousy job. I walked the opposite direction, turned a corner, and ducked into a diner with chrome trim and the smell of fried onions that could wake the dead. I slid into a booth, ordered coffee, and watched the reflection in the window. 2 men came in 3 minutes later. One was too broad to be a poet. The other was too neat to be honest. They sat at the counter and pretended to read menus. The neat one didn't turn a page. I finished my coffee, left a tip big enough to impress the waitress, and went out the back. New York is full of exits if you're willing to smell garbage. I caught another taxi and headed for the West Side warehouse address Miss Langer had given me. The building squatted near the river like something that had been dragged ashore and abandoned. Trucks idled, men shouted, and crates were stacked in careful rows like a game played by someone who hated disorder. I flashed a smile and walked in as if I belonged. A guard stepped into my path. Deliveries only. Then I'm delivering myself, I said. I'm here to see the manifest clerk. No clerk here. That's funny, I said. Because the embassy says everything passes through here. He glared. Move along. I was considering options, none of them polite, when a forklift beeped behind us and a man shouted. Then another voice barked an order in a language that wasn't English but carried the universal tone of someone who expects obedience. I turned my head and saw him. Tall. Clean-shaven. Pale eyes. Gloves. Mr. Sorrel. He looked at me like he was deciding whether I was worth paperwork. Who are you? He asked. Archie Goodwin, I said. Private investigator. I'm here about Emil Varga. A flicker, small, quick, crossed his face. Not surprise. Recognition. Never heard of him, Sorrel said. That was the second lie I'd caught today, and it was barely lunchtime. Before I could reply, a commotion erupted near the loading bay. Men stepped back. Someone shouted for an ambulance, which is always a sign that your day is improving, implies you've been shot. I pushed through the crowd and saw a body on the concrete floor. Male. Mid-30s. Suit jacket twisted. Blood spreading beneath his head like a dark idea. One eye open, staring at nothing. A worker muttered, he fell. I knelt and looked closer. The man's neck was at an angle that screamed helped. And near his hand, half hidden under a crate, was a leather wallet. I didn't touch it. I'm fast, not stupid. Sorrel stepped in beside me. This is not your affair. Someone died in front of me, I said. That makes it my affair for at least 10 seconds. He leaned down, saw the wallet, and his gloved hand twitched, just slightly, toward it. Then he stopped himself, which told me it mattered. Sirens wailed outside, growing louder. The police had been called fast, too fast, unless someone wanted them here. A squad car rolled up, and out came Inspector Kramer, looking like someone had bitten his breakfast. Goodwin, he growled the moment he saw me. What the hell are you doing here? Shopping, I said. They had a sale on corpses. Kramer's eyes narrowed. This is a diplomatic shipment facility. State Department's already on the phone. Sure, I said. Diplomatic immunity, like a raincoat for murder. Kramer pointed a thick finger at me. Tell Wolfe to keep his nose out of it. Tell the corpse, I said, and stood. Kramer bent to examine the body. A uniformed cop murmured something, and Kramer's face tightened. What? I demanded. Kramer looked up at me, and for once his voice lost a little of its bark. ID says he's Emil Varga. The missing clerk. Found not missing anymore. And the thing that settled in my gut wasn't relief, it was the cold certainty that the embassy hadn't been worried about him disappearing. They'd been counting on him staying silent. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without moving, his fingers steepled, his eyes half-lidded as if he were watching a chessboard 3 moves ahead. A body, Wolfe said softly. Found at the warehouse. Identified as Emil Varga. According to Kramer, I said. And according to a wallet someone with gloves wanted very badly. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Diplomatic shadows, he murmured. They have moved from disappearance to murder. Wolfe, I said, Kramer told you to keep your nose out. Wolfe's eyes met mine. Calm. Cold. Certain. Archie, he said, when a man is erased, and then murdered to keep him erased, the situation has ceased to be diplomatic. It has become personal, to my intellect. Then he reached for his beer with the solemnity of a man accepting a challenge, and the orchids behind him glowed like pale witnesses to whatever came next. Chapter 3, The Mirage Cracks. If there's one thing Nero Wolfe enjoys more than orchids and beer, it's paperwork that lies. Give him a ledger with a nervous twitch and he'll pet it like a cat until it confesses. By the time Chapter 3 rolled around, the brownstone had taken on that special tension that means Wolfe is thinking hard and the rest of us are about to sweat. The orchids were glowing softly, mist drifting in the air, Fritz was clattering in the kitchen with aggressive cheerfulness, and Wolfe sat in his yellow armchair like a large, upholstered inevitability. On the desk in front of him lay a neat stack of embassy shipping manifests, visa logs, cultural exchange schedules, and customs declarations. They looked innocent enough, cream paper, tidy type, official seals. They also smelled wrong. I knew that because Wolfe hadn't touched his beer. That's a symptom. Archie, Wolfe said, without looking up, you are breathing too loudly. I'll try to suffocate quietly, I said, and leaned against the desk. You going to tell me what these papers are confessing, or should I interrogate them with a rubber hose? These documents, Wolfe said, tapping the stack with one thick finger, were designed to be boring. That is their camouflage. Boring usually works on me, I admitted. What's the flaw? Consistency, Wolfe said. Too much of it. I blinked. You're saying they're too neat? Precisely. Cultural exchanges arrive on a schedule that obeys human whim, not Swiss precision. Yet these shipments arrive every 6 weeks, without variation, regardless of weather, holidays, or political inconvenience. Art doesn't like routines, I said. People do. People lie, Wolfe corrected. Paper lies worse. He slid one manifest toward me. Note the names. I scanned the list. Anton Klein. Stefan Radu. Marcello Vieri. Now compare this, Wolfe said, handing me another sheet. Same names. Different countries of origin. Different visa classifications. Same photographs. I looked up slowly. That's our miracle again. Indeed, Wolfe said. The mirage persists. The phone rang. Wolfe ignored it. It rang again. I picked it up. Goodwin, I said. A man's voice, breathless and sharp. This is Morin. We must speak. Immediately. You sound like a man who just discovered gravity, I said. Where are you? At the Belvedere Hotel. Room 904. But do not come here. The line went dead. I looked at Wolfe. Our cultural attaché just lost his nerve, or his phone. Wolfe frowned. You will go. Of course, I said. Why break tradition? I grabbed my coat and headed out into the afternoon, New York wearing its gray coat and pretending it wasn't watching. A taxi took me uptown, the driver humming off-key like a man unconcerned with international conspiracies. The Belvedere Hotel was respectable, anonymous, and just expensive enough to make murder feel uncomfortable. I rode the elevator up, sharing it with a woman wearing too much perfume and a man wearing too little expression. Room 904 didn't answer my knock. I tried again. Nothing. I was considering my options, none of them polite, when I noticed the door across the hall open a crack. A maid's cart sat nearby, abandoned like a thought interrupted. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I tried the handle. Unlocked. The room was neat in the way that suggests someone left in a hurry but hoped to return. Suitcase open on the bed. Papers scattered. A half-packed briefcase on the chair. No Morin. I moved carefully. On the desk lay a passport. One I hadn't seen before. Different name. Same photograph. Congratulations, I muttered. You win a set. There was a sudden sound behind me, the softest whisper of fabric. I turned. A man stood in the doorway. Tall. Clean-shaven. Pale eyes. Gloves. Sorrel. Good evening, Mr. Goodwin, he said pleasantly. You are trespassing. That's funny, I said. I was about to say the same thing to you. He smiled thinly. You should leave. Where's Morin? I asked. He shrugged. Mr. Morin has departed. Vertically or horizontally? The smile vanished. You are persistent. Occupational hazard. He stepped closer. I noticed then that his gloves were spotless. Not a crease. Not a stain. Like he'd never touched anything that mattered. Mr. Goodwin, he said, this is a misunderstanding. You are involving yourself in affairs beyond your scope. That's what the last 3 guys said, I replied. 2 of them are dead. Something flickered in his eyes, not fear. Calculation. A noise came from the hallway, footsteps, voices. Sorrel stepped back, instantly composed. For your own sake, he said softly, forget Emil Varga. Forget Pavel Morin. Forget this room. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the door open and the room suddenly much too quiet. I didn't forget. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened with the stillness of a man assembling a cathedral in his head. Morin has vanished, Wolfe said. Sorrel persists. And the passports multiply. Like rabbits, I said. Except deadlier. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The body found at the warehouse, did you observe the wrists? I frowned. I was busy not getting arrested. Why? Because, Wolfe said, the coroner's preliminary report, procured with some effort, notes faint abrasions. Rope. Removed. So he didn't fall, I said. Of course not, Wolfe snapped. He was placed. The phone rang again. Wolfe gestured irritably. I answered. Goodwin, I said. Inspector Kramer's voice came through like gravel in a blender. You and Wolfe are officially out of bounds. That's my favorite zone, I said. Listen, Kramer growled, lowering his voice. State Department's crawling all over this. The embassy's screaming immunity. They say Varga wasn't even Varga. Now there's a shock. Kramer sighed. We've got another problem. Let me guess, I said. Someone tried to die and failed. Warehouse clerk, Kramer said. Hit from behind last night. Survived. Won't talk. I looked at Wolfe. He was smiling slightly. That's worse than yelling. Where's the clerk now? I asked. Hospital. Guarded. By police? And two men who don't blink, Kramer said. Your friends. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. Someone's cleaning house. Yes, Wolfe said calmly. And doing so inefficiently. He reached for his beer at last, took a measured sip, and set it down. The embassy is not an embassy, Wolfe said. It is a conduit. For what? I asked. For people, Wolfe replied. People who must become other people. I leaned back. Identity laundering. Exactly, Wolfe said. A mirage of nations to disguise the movement of men. And Emil Varga? I asked. A clerk, Wolfe said, who realized that paperwork is destiny. The doorbell rang. Fritz appeared, eyebrows raised. Herr Wolfe, a gentleman insists. Who? Wolfe demanded. Mr. Morin, Fritz said. He looks rearranged. Morin came in 10 seconds later, pale, sweating, his suit rumpled like it had slept badly. He looked at Wolfe with the desperation of a man who knows he's already dead but hopes to be late. They are evacuating, Morin blurted. Tonight. Personnel, documents, everything. Wolfe nodded. I expected as much. They will erase everything, Morin said. Including me. Not if I prevent it, Wolfe said mildly. Morin laughed, sharp and brittle. You think you can stop an embassy? Wolfe's eyes hardened. I do not intend to stop an embassy, he said. I intend to expose a mirage. Outside, New York darkened, lights flickering on like 1,000 watching eyes. Inside the brownstone, the orchids glowed pale and patient, and I had the distinct feeling that whatever was coming next would not be diplomatic, legal, or gentle, but it would be precise. And with Nero Wolfe, precision is fatal. Chapter 4, A Passport for a Dead Man. There's a special kind of chill that settles into Nero Wolfe's brownstone when the facts start contradicting each other in a polite voice. It's not fear, Wolfe doesn't do fear. It's irritation sharpened into focus, like a razor freshly honed and eager for work. That morning the orchids were misted twice, which told me Wolfe was thinking harder than usual. Fritz moved quietly, as if loud footsteps might offend logic. Wolfe sat in his yellow armchair, massive and unmoving, a stack of papers arranged on the desk with military precision. I stood opposite him, coffee in hand, waiting for the hammer to fall. Archie, Wolfe said, the man identified as Emil Varga was not Emil Varga. That's a relief, I said. I was worried things were getting simple. Wolfe's eyes flicked up. Sarcasm is wasted. Pay attention. He slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside were death certificates, foreign, stamped, official-looking. I counted 3. All dated 5 years ago, I said. Different countries. Same name. Indeed, Wolfe said. Emil Varga died 3 times before he was murdered. That's got to be a record. Not if one is laundering identities, Wolfe said. The deceased are convenient. They raise no objections. I leaned back. So the man in the warehouse was wearing the name of a man already legally dead. Correct. And Morin? Wolfe frowned. Still alive. For now. The phone rang. Wolfe ignored it. It rang again. Wolfe, I said, if that's the universe calling, you might want to answer. Wolfe growled but gestured. I picked up. Goodwin, I said. A clipped voice replied, this is Agent Collins. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Congratulations, I said. You found the phone. We need to speak with Nero Wolfe. You're doing great so far, I said. Wolfe waved me off, irritation deepening. I relayed the receiver. Agent Collins didn't waste time. Mr. Wolfe, this matter now involves national security. Wolfe snorted. That phrase is applied when incompetence wishes to sound dignified. An embassy employee is dead, Collins said. And diplomatic immunity applies. To embassies, Wolfe said. Not to mirages. There was a pause. You are warned, Collins said coldly. Cease involvement. Wolfe hung up without goodbye. Friendly fellow, I said. An amateur, Wolfe replied. Now, Archie, you will go to the municipal records office. I blinked. City Hall. I thought you hated bureaucracy. I despise it, Wolfe said. Which is why I understand it. You will request death records for Emil Varga. I just saw 3. Domestic records, Wolfe corrected. New York. That took me into the city's paper underbelly, file rooms, counters, clerks with expressions permanently set to "Why are you alive?" I flashed credentials, smiled when required, frowned when useful, and an hour later I had my prize. Emil Varga had died in Brooklyn 6 years ago. Cause, industrial accident. I whistled softly. Busy guy. Back in the brownstone, Wolfe absorbed this without visible reaction. 3 deaths abroad. 1 domestic, Wolfe said. That confirms it. Confirms what? I asked. That Varga was never the same man twice. Identity recycling, I said. Efficient. And lucrative, Wolfe added. Fritz appeared with lunch, veal, done perfectly. Wolfe ate slowly, thoughtfully, like a man nourishing his brain through his stomach. Archie, Wolfe said between bites, the murder did not occur at the warehouse. I raised an eyebrow. You want to tell that to the corpse? The killing, Wolfe corrected, occurred earlier. The warehouse was staging. How do you know? Because the body was transported. The neck injury indicates restraint before death. And because murderers who rely on immunity prefer control. I considered that. So where was he killed? Where records are kept, Wolfe said. Where he discovered the truth. The embassy, I said softly. Precisely. The doorbell rang again. This time, Inspector Kramer pushed his way in like a bad idea with legs. Wolfe, he barked, you're obstructing a federal investigation. Wolfe looked at him calmly. You are mistaking obstruction for comprehension. Kramer glared. They're evacuating embassy personnel tonight. State Department approved. Of course they did, Wolfe said. You do not clean a stage while the audience is watching. They say it's routine. Wolfe smiled thinly. Routine is always the lie people hide behind. Kramer turned to me. Goodwin, you're off this case. I shrugged. You keep saying that. Kramer leaned in. This is bigger than murder. Wolfe's voice cut in. No, Inspector. It is smaller. Murder is the result, not the purpose. Kramer paused. Then what's the purpose? Wolfe's eyes hardened. Profit. That landed. Kramer frowned, confused but listening. These identities, Wolfe continued, are commodities. Clean, transferable, diplomatic. Men who should not exist are moved across borders and reborn. Criminals. Financiers. Occasionally assassins. Kramer swore softly. You saying this embassy's selling people? I am saying, Wolfe replied, that they are selling erasure. Kramer rubbed his face. And Varga? A clerk, Wolfe said, who realized that dead men were arriving alive. Silence settled like dust. Outside, a taxi honked. Inside, the orchid seemed to lean in. Where does Morin fit? I asked. Wolfe's eyes flicked to the window. As a conscience. Or a liability. As if summoned by the word, the phone rang again. I answered. Goodwin. Morin's voice came through, strained. They are watching me. I found something. Where are you? Bryant Park, he whispered. Near the library. If anything happens. The line went dead. Wolfe stood up. That alone made the room feel smaller. Archie, he said, already reaching for his coat, we will retrieve Mr. Morin. You're leaving the chair, I said. Yes, Wolfe said grimly. Which means this matter has offended me. We took a taxi, Wolfe filling the back seat like a displeased emperor. The city slid by in streaks of light and shadow. When we reached Bryant Park, police lights were already flashing. Morin lay on the pavement, shaken but breathing. A patrolman was helping him sit up. What happened? I asked. Someone tried to push me into traffic, Morin said hoarsely. He slipped. Wolfe studied him. What did you find? Morin reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. This. Wolfe took it. His eyes scanned the page. A list of names. Dates. Ports of entry. And at the bottom, one final notation, next transfer imminent. Wolfe folded the paper carefully. The man who does not exist, Wolfe said quietly, is about to arrive. Morin looked at him, terrified. You can stop them. Wolfe's gaze was steady, implacable. Yes, he said. But first, we must let them believe the mirage still holds. The city hummed around us, indifferent and vast. Somewhere, an embassy was packing up lies. Somewhere else, a killer believed himself protected by paperwork and flags. And back at the brownstone, the orchids waited, patient, silent witnesses to the moment when illusion would meet intellect and lose. I had the feeling we were past the polite phase now. And with Nero Wolfe, that's when things get fatal. Chapter 5, The False Flag. If you want to see a roomful of liars sweat without turning on the heat, put Nero Wolfe at the head of the table and tell them dinner will be delayed. That's the theory, anyway. Wolfe put it to the test that evening, and I got to watch the experiment from ringside. The brownstone smelled like orchids and roast duck. Fritz had outdone himself, which meant Wolfe was in a generous mood. Generous for him, that is. He sat in the yellow armchair, massive and calm, fingers steepled, beer untouched. When Wolfe delays beer, something expensive is about to break. I stood near the desk, notebook in hand, playing the amiable accessory. It's my best role. The guests arrived in pairs and singles, ushered in by Fritz with the faintly scandalized air of a man who dislikes chaos in his dining room. There was Counselor Ribbock from the embassy, tall and smooth, his smile like it had been laminated. There was Miss Langer, pale but composed, eyes bright with a fear she was working hard to discipline. There was a man introduced as Mr. Feld, logistics consultant, whose hands never quite stopped moving. And there was Sorrel. Tall. Clean-shaven. Pale eyes. Gloves. He didn't sit until Wolfe gestured, and even then he chose a chair near the wall, where exits were plentiful. That told me a lot and confirmed nothing. Wolfe waited until everyone was seated. Silence settled, heavy and polite. Good evening, Wolfe said. You have been invited here because you are connected to an enterprise that pretends to be cultural. Ribbock smiled. Mr. Wolfe, this is highly irregular. On the contrary, Wolfe replied. Irregularities are my specialty. I suppressed a grin. Wolfe continued, your embassy has functioned as a conduit for identities. Passports, visas, credentials, commodities exchanged under diplomatic cover. That is an accusation, Ribbock said, voice still smooth. It is an observation, Wolfe said. The distinction matters. Sorrel's eyes flicked to me, then back to Wolfe. You have no proof. Wolfe nodded. Indeed. Which is why you are here. That got a reaction. Feld shifted. Miss Langer's hands tightened in her lap. Ribbock's smile thinned. Emile Varga, Wolfe said softly. A clerk. Or so he was called. Miss Langer inhaled sharply, then mastered herself. He discovered, Wolfe went on, that certain cultural shipments did not contain art. They contained men. That's absurd, Feld said quickly. Exchanges are vetted. By whom? Wolfe asked. You. Feld opened his mouth, then closed it. Wolfe leaned back. Let us dispense with ideology. This is not politics. It is business. That landed. It always does. Each identity, Wolfe continued, commands a price. The cleaner the past, the higher the fee. Dead men are ideal. They do not object to reuse. Ribok stood. This meeting is over. No, Wolfe said mildly. It is not. Sorrel's gloved hand moved, just a fraction, toward his pocket. I straightened. Wolfe noticed and smiled faintly. Violence would be inconvenient, Wolfe said. Inspector Kramer is nearby. He is always inconvenient. That froze the room. Now, Wolfe said, the murder of Emil Varga occurred when he refused to accept a bribe. Miss Langer looked up. He was offered money. Considerable, Wolfe said. And declined. Sorrel's jaw tightened. Why? I asked, playing dumb. Seems like a sensible retirement plan. Because, Wolfe said, Varga was not ideological. He was meticulous. He valued order. Disorder offended him. Ribok scoffed. You romanticize a clerk. Wolfe's eyes hardened. I recognize myself. That shut him up. Wolfe reached to the desk and produced a ledger. These entries, he said, show profits routed through shell companies. Cultural grants. Educational endowments. All respectable. All false. Feld's hand stopped moving. Who benefits? Wolfe asked. Silence. Profit, Wolfe answered himself. Not ideology. Not loyalty. Profit. Sorrel spoke then, voice cool. Even if this were true, you cannot prove murder. Wolfe nodded. Correct. Which is why I am not accusing you of murder. I frowned. That was new. I am accusing you, Wolfe continued, eyes on Sorrel, of being careless. Sorrel's gaze didn't waver. Careless men do not survive long. Indeed, Wolfe said. Which is why you are not the killer. That sent a ripple through the room. Miss Langer gasped. Feld stared. Ribok frowned. Sorrel's expression flickered, surprise, then relief, then caution. The killer, Wolfe said, panicked. He turned to Feld. You manage logistics. You saw Varga's objections. You attempted to buy him. When that failed, you arranged his removal. Feld shot to his feet. That's insane. Sit down, Wolfe said, and Feld did, hard. But, Wolfe went on, you did not kill him. I blinked. Wolfe. Patience, Archie. Wolfe addressed the room. The actual killing was delegated. A mistake. The staging at the warehouse was clumsy. The attempted murder of the clerk afterward was desperate. Ribok's voice was hoarse. Then who? Wolfe held up a hand. Not yet. He looked at Miss Langer. You were warned. Not bribed. Why? She swallowed. Because I was replaceable. Yes, Wolfe said. Which made you harmless. He turned back to Sorrel. You enforce. You do not decide. Sorrel inclined his head. Correct. Which leaves, Wolfe said, the man who authorized the escalation. All eyes turned to Ribok. He laughed, brittle. You have nothing. Wolfe smiled. On the contrary. The phone rang. I answered. Goodwin. Kramer's voice came through, tense. Warehouse clerk just woke up. That's encouraging. He's talking, Kramer said. Says he saw the killer's face. Wolfe's eyes never left Ribok. And? I asked. He recognized him from embassy receptions, Kramer said. Says the man gave the orders. Ribok went pale. Wolfe leaned forward. You see, he said softly, profit breeds impatience. You wanted to protect your revenue stream. You authorized murder. Ribok slammed his fist on the chair. You can't prove it. Not yet, Wolfe said. But the Mirage is collapsing. Outside, sirens wailed closer. Inside, the orchid seemed to watch, impassive and pale. Wolfe stood. This meeting is concluded. Mr. Ribok, you will remain seated. Ribok looked at Sorrel. Sorrel did not move. I told you, Wolfe said calmly, this is not ideology. Loyalty dissolves in the presence of evidence. Kramer burst in moments later, face grim, eyes sharp. Which one? Wolfe gestured toward Ribok. For now. Kramer nodded and moved in. Ribok sagged as the cuffs went on. As the room emptied, Wolfe sank back into his chair and finally lifted his beer. Well, I said, that went almost politely. Wolfe took a sip. Do not be deceived, Archie. This was only a flag. A false one, I said. Precisely, Wolfe replied. The real vessel has not yet docked. Outside, New York buzzed, uncaring. Somewhere, a man without an identity was still in motion, and the game, according to Wolfe's clock, was far from over. I closed my notebook, feeling that familiar mix of admiration and dread. When Wolfe says, not yet, it's never a comfort. Chapter 6, The Man Who Didn't Exist. If you want to find a man who doesn't exist, the first thing you learn is that he leaves fingerprints everywhere, just not the kind the police can dust. By the time Chapter 6 rolled around, Nero Wolfe had returned to his natural habitat, the yellow armchair, orchids breathing softly behind him, a bottle of beer sweating on the side table like it knew it was under observation. Fritz moved quietly, delivering coffee, then retreating as if the room itself might bite. Wolfe sat with his eyes closed. That's never a good sign. It means the machinery is running. Archie, he said, without opening them, you will leave the house. That's my favorite assignment, I said. Any particular continent? Several, Wolfe replied. You will trace the man who authorized the transfer listed as imminent. I frowned. We don't have a name. We have something better, Wolfe said. His eyes opened. We have an absence. He tapped the list Morin had smuggled out, ports, dates, code names. One entry was circled in Wolfe's precise hand. See, he said. Everyone else has history. This one has none. Like a politician's conscience, I said. Exactly, Wolfe replied. Find where he should be, and you will find where he is not. That's Wolfe logic. It makes sense after you surrender. I hit the streets with a notebook, a roll of small bills, and the city's best invention, taxis that don't ask questions if you tip well. The trail took me through shipping offices, consulates, freight forwarders, and one diner that served eggs tough enough to qualify as building materials. Patterns emerged. A man matching a vague description, average height, forgettable face, excellent posture, had appeared in Rome, then vanished. Reappeared in Lisbon. Then Montreal. Always under different names. Always just ahead of paperwork catching up. I finally got lucky in a midtown travel office run by a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper memory. He came in asking for passage, she said, tapping ash into a tray. Didn't know where he was going, only where he wasn't. Story of my life, I said. What name did he use? She snorted. Which one? She handed me a carbon copy. The name meant nothing. The passport number did, it matched one of Wolfe's miracles. He paid cash, she added. Exact amount. No change. That told me more than she knew. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe absorbed my report while slicing an apple with surgical care. He exists between systems, Wolfe said. A professional absence. Think he killed Varga? I asked. Wolfe shook his head. No. He profits from the system. Killing is inefficient. Then who? Patience, Archie, Wolfe said. The important matter is timing. He gestured to the clock. The evacuation proceeds tonight. Which means the transfer must occur before dawn. The phone rang. I answered. Goodwin, I said. Morin's voice came through, strained. They are burning records. That's dramatic, I said. Anything specific? Yes, he said. One name. It keeps being removed. Which name? There was a pause. None. I looked at Wolfe. He smiled slightly. Thank you, Wolfe said when I relayed it. That confirms it. Confirms what? I asked. That the man who does not exist has arrived. The night thickened. New York after dark is a different animal, less polite, more honest. Shadows stretched. Windows glowed like watching eyes. Wolfe summoned Kramer. Kramer arrived grumbling, coat collar up, hat pulled low. I'm running out of patience, Wolfe. You never had much to begin with, Wolfe replied. Sit down. Kramer sat. The next transfer, Wolfe said, will occur at a private terminal near the river. A cultural envoy departing quietly. Kramer frowned. We've got no such flight. Exactly, Wolfe said. Kramer stared. You're saying. I am saying, Wolfe interrupted, that a man will leave the country under a name that has never entered it. Kramer swore. That's impossible. Wolfe sipped his beer. Yet profitable. Kramer leaned forward. You got a suspect? Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Archie? I shook my head. Not yet. But I've got a smell. Kramer groaned. I hate smells. Ignore it, Wolfe said. You will post men at the terminal. Observe only. No arrests. Not yet, Wolfe said. Kramer glared. You're enjoying this. Immensely, Wolfe replied. After Kramer left, the house settled into an expectant hush. Fritz brought sandwiches. Wolfe ignored his. That's when I knew the clock was loud. At 11:30, the phone rang again. I answered. A whisper. They're moving him. Who? I asked. The one with no file, Morin said. Sorrel is escorting him. That caught my attention. Sorrel enforces, I said. Yes, Morin replied. But tonight, he is nervous. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. Sorrel sweating. Good, Wolfe said. Sweat reveals structure. We waited. At 12:15, Wolfe spoke quietly. Archie, the murder of Emil Varga did not occur on the night he died. I frowned. We covered that. No, Wolfe said. We misdated it. He leaned forward. Varga was killed the moment he was identified as unnecessary. Meaning? Meaning the decision preceded the act, Wolfe said. The killer acted on authorization, not impulse. Ribbok? A convenient decoy, Wolfe said. Ambitious, yes. But not decisive. So who decides? I asked. Wolfe's eyes glittered. The man who does not exist. That landed hard. You're saying our ghost ordered the hit? Precisely, Wolfe said. Because Varga threatened the integrity of the system. And systems protect themselves. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. At the terminal, Wolfe murmured. We listened to the radio. Reports crackled in. Confusion. Someone had used Russian by mistake. Wolfe smiled. Careless. The phone rang. Kramer. We've got him, Kramer barked. Or something like him. No valid passport. Claims diplomatic courier status. And? Wolfe asked. And he knows your name, Kramer said. Says he'll only talk to you. Wolfe stood. That made my pulse jump. At the terminal, the air smelled like oil and water and secrets. Kramer's men stood around a man who looked exactly like he should, average, calm, empty. No name? I asked. He smiled. Names are temporary. Wolfe regarded him. You authorized a murder. The man shrugged. I authorized continuity. Emil Varga, Wolfe said, was an inconvenience. He was sloppy, the man said. He looked too closely. That is not a crime, Wolfe said. No, the man replied. But it is expensive. Wolfe nodded. And you arranged his death. Through intermediaries, the man said. Efficiency. I felt a chill. You don't even care who did it. The man smiled faintly. Why should I? I don't exist. Wolfe leaned in. You are mistaken. The man's eyes flickered. You exist, Wolfe continued, in patterns. In timing. In fear. Sirens grew louder. Kramer moved in. We've got enough. Wolfe raised a hand. Not yet. He looked at the man. You will attempt to trade information for immunity. The man hesitated. And fail, Wolfe added, because your immunity depends on anonymity. Which I have destroyed. The man exhaled slowly. Kramer snapped the cuffs on. As we drove back, the city quieter now, I glanced at Wolfe. So that's him. Wolfe shook his head. No. I stared. Then who the hell was that? A functionary, Wolfe said. Important. Dangerous. But not the killer. I groaned. Wolfe. The killer, Wolfe said calmly, is closer than you think. And very anxious. Back at the brownstone, the orchids glowed serenely, indifferent to men who did or didn't exist. Wolfe sat back in his chair, finally relaxed. Archie, he said, prepare yourself. Tomorrow, we set the mirror. And with Wolfe, mirrors are never kind. Chapter 7, The Mirror Room. Nero Wolfe calls it a gathering. I call it a controlled detonation. By mid-afternoon the brownstone had been transformed into what Wolfe privately refers to as a mirror room, everything arranged to reflect something else. Chairs placed just so. Papers stacked with theatrical neatness. The orchids missed it early in glowing with that pale, judicial calm they get when Wolfe intends to pass sentence later. Wolfe sat in his yellow armchair, of course, immovable, massive, composed. His beer stood unopened at his elbow. When Wolfe delays beer twice in one day, someone's nerves are about to be pawned. I stood near the desk, playing master of ceremonies and professional irritant. They're here, Fritz murmured from the hall. Excellent, Wolfe said. Let the illusions assemble. They came in one by one. Councillor Ribach, recently freed on procedural purgatory, wearing confidence like a borrowed coat. Miss Langer, pale but determined, carrying herself like a woman who had decided fear was no longer efficient. Mr. Feld, hands twitching, eyes darting. Sorrel, tall, gloved, pale-eyed, standing as if exits were punctuation marks. And finally, Inspector Kramer, scowling as if he'd been invited to a chess match and handed a deck of cards. Wolfe waited until everyone was seated. Silence stretched. It was deliberate. Wolfe enjoys silence the way some men enjoy applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Wolfe began, you are here because one of you committed murder. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed properly. Wolfe continued, the death of Emil Varga was not impulsive. It was administrative. That's obscene, Rybak snapped. On the contrary, Wolfe replied calmly. It is precise. I leaned against the desk. If it helps, I found it very touching. Bureaucracy with a human cost. Kramer shot me a look. I smiled back. Wolfe gestured to the desk. Archie. I placed 2 passports side by side, identical photographs staring up like twins who had learned to lie early. A miracle, I said. 2 countries, 1 face. Miss Langer looked away. Feld swallowed. Sorrel did not move. These, Wolfe said, are bait. Sorrel's eyes flicked to them, just once. Quick. Controlled. Wolfe noticed. Each of you, Wolfe went on, has interacted with false identities. Some created them. Some protected them. Some enforced their use. And some exploited them, I added. Wolfe nodded. Profit was the motive. Not ideology. Not patriotism. Feld shifted in his chair. You keep saying profit like it's a crime. It becomes one, Wolfe said, when it requires murder to sustain. Rybak leaned forward. You have accused everyone and proved nothing. Wolfe smiled faintly. Ah. But proof is a performance. He tapped the desk. The man who ordered the murder believed himself invisible. He was not present at the act. He did not touch the body. He merely approved a correction. That's nonsense, Feld said. You can't arrest a thought. No, Wolfe agreed. But you can observe reflexes. Wolfe looked at me. Archie. I produced a 3rd passport and laid it beside the others. Same photograph. Different name. Miss Langer gasped softly. That passport, Wolfe said, belongs to a man who does not exist. Or rather, did not. Sorrel's jaw tightened. The gloves creaked faintly as his fingers flexed. Wolfe's voice sharpened. When Emil Varga discovered the duplication, he became a liability. A decision was made. But not by those you would expect. Rybak laughed harshly. You think we authorize killings casually? Wolfe's eyes locked on him. No. You delegate. And who do you think decided? Rybak demanded. Wolfe did not answer. He simply slid the 3rd passport forward. The killer, Wolfe said, revealed himself by instinct. The room leaned forward as one. Wolfe gestured to the passports. These identities are interchangeable. Except one. He pointed to the 3rd. This identity was scheduled for transfer. The others were expendable. Sorrel spoke, voice cool. You're speculating. Wolfe turned his gaze fully on him. Then why did you glance at the wrong passport first? The room froze. Sorrel's eyes flicked, just a fraction, toward the 3rd passport. Too late. That, Wolfe said softly, was not your role. Kramer straightened. What do you mean, Wolfe? Wolfe leaned back. Enforcers memorize procedures, not priorities. Only a decision-maker reacts to future assets. Sorrel's face remained composed, but something had cracked behind the eyes. That's absurd, Feld said weakly. Is it? Wolfe said. You wear gloves indoors. You avoid paper. You give orders but never sign them. Sorrel smiled thinly. Circumstantial. Wolfe nodded. Then let us consider the timing. He looked at Kramer. Inspector, when did the authorization for Varga's removal occur? Kramer checked his notes. 2 days before the body surfaced. Before Ribach panicked, Wolfe said. Before Feld attempted bribery. Before Morin fled. Sorrel inhaled slowly. Only one man, Wolfe said, had both the authority and the foresight to act that early. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. Sorrel stood. Sit down, Kramer barked. Sorrel did not. You misunderstand, Sorrel said calmly. This is over. He took one step toward the door. Kramer moved. I moved. Wolfe did not. You will not leave, Wolfe said mildly. Because if you do, you validate everything I have said. Sorrel hesitated. That was it. Just a hesitation. Wolfe smiled. There, Wolfe said. That is the mirror. Sorrel looked around the room. For the first time, he looked uncertain. You enforced, Wolfe continued, until enforcement became inefficient. Then you decided. Miss Langer whispered, you killed him. Sorrel's gaze snapped to her. I corrected an anomaly. Kramer lunged. Sorrel raised his hands slowly. No violence, Sorrel said. It would be impolite. Cuffs clicked. The room exhaled. Ribach sank back into his chair, stunned. Feld wiped his brow. Miss Langer closed her eyes. I looked at Wolfe. So that's it? Wolfe shook his head. No, he said calmly. That is the exposure. Kramer frowned. What do you mean? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. We have identified the hand. Not yet the mechanism. Sorrel was led away, still composed, still dangerous. As the room emptied, Wolfe finally reached for his beer. Wolfe, I said, you just handed Kramer a suspect. Yes, Wolfe replied, sipping. But not yet a conviction. I stared. You're saying. I am saying, Wolfe interrupted gently, that murder is rarely committed by the man you catch thinking. The orchids glowed softly behind him, untroubled. Outside, New York hummed, unaware that a mirage had cracked, but not yet collapsed. I had a bad feeling. When Wolfe withholds the final truth, it's because he's setting the last trap. And those are never polite. Chapter 8, Diplomatic Immunity ends. There's a particular stillness that settles into Nero Wolfe's brownstone when the game is over but the last piece hasn't been knocked off the board yet. It's not suspense exactly, it's inevitability, waiting for paperwork to catch up with truth. That morning Wolfe ate his breakfast with satisfaction, which should have warned everyone involved. Fritz served kidneys and bacon, perfectly timed, and the orchids glowed like pale witnesses who already knew the verdict. Wolfe sat in his yellow armchair, massive and serene, beer unopened, eyes half-lidded. I paced. You going to tell me, I asked, or do I need to trip over the body first? Wolfe did not look up. Archie, you are impatient because you assume the murderer is the most dramatic participant. I assume the murderer is the guy who killed someone, I said. Incorrect, Wolfe replied. The murderer is the one who made killing necessary. That slowed me down. You cleared Sorrel, I said. I exposed him, Wolfe corrected. He authorized force. He did not commit murder. Then who did? I demanded. Wolfe finally looked at me. Who profits when immunity is believed, he said, but collapses when tested? The doorbell rang. Wolfe smiled faintly. Excellent timing. Inspector Kramer arrived carrying irritation and a folded warrant, his face already set to disappointment. All right, Wolfe, he growled. You've danced long enough. The State Department's screaming. Sorrel's lawyers are screaming. I'm screaming. Yes, Wolfe said calmly. But the truth is quieter. Kramer snorted. Then start whispering. Wolfe gestured toward the desk. Archie. I placed the final document there, An amended shipping manifest I'd lifted quietly the night before, stamped and re-stamped, bearing a single overlooked signature. Feld's. Kramer frowned. The logistics consultant. The man who touches everything, Wolfe said, and therefore believes himself invisible. Kramer's brow furrowed. Feld didn't have authority. No, Wolfe agreed. But he had access. Wolfe leaned forward. Feld did not authorize the murder. He executed it. Kramer stiffened. You said. I said Sorrel authorized force, Wolfe interrupted. I did not say Sorrel authorized how. I jumped in. Feld was the only one with unrestricted access to the warehouse, the manifests, and Varga's schedule. He arranged the staging. Kramer stared. You're saying the clerk was killed by the man who tried to bribe him, Wolfe finished. When bribery failed, Feld panicked. That contradicts. Nothing, Wolfe said sharply. Panic is not inconsistent with profit. It is inevitable. Kramer exhaled. But immunity does not apply, Wolfe said calmly, to a private contractor. That landed hard. Kramer's eyes widened. Feld wasn't diplomatic. Exactly, Wolfe said. He hid behind those who were. The phone rang. I answered. Goodwin, I said. Miss Langer's voice came through, steady now. They found Emil Varga's Real file. Wolfe held up a hand. I relayed. It was hidden in Feld's private safe, she said. He'd marked it obsolete. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Thank you, Miss Langer. Kramer straightened. That's enough. He turned on his heel and barked orders into the hallway. 20 minutes later, Feld was brought in, hands shaking, tie crooked, confidence evaporated. I didn't mean to kill him, Feld said immediately, which is always a mistake. Wolfe regarded him coldly. You meant to silence him. He was going to destroy everything. Feld protested. The operation, the profits. You strangled him in the records room, Wolfe said. You panicked when he refused your money. You staged the warehouse scene to invoke diplomatic confusion. Feld sagged. I thought immunity would cover it. That, Wolfe said, was your final error. Kramer snapped the cuffs on. You're done. As Feld was led away, Kramer turned back to Wolfe. What about Sorrel? Sorrel will answer, Wolfe said, for what he authorized. But not for murder. Kramer nodded slowly. And the embassy? A mirage, Wolfe said. Already dissolving. True to form, the embassy quietly shut down within 48 hours. Personnel reassigned. Records sealed. Statements issued that said nothing and meant less. Sorrel vanished into legal limbo, his immunity shredded by the one thing it couldn't survive, clarity. Morin left the country under his real name. Miss Langer received a new position and a very long vacation. And Emil Varga, real name, real life, was buried once, properly. That evening, Wolfe sat in his armchair, beer finally in hand, orchids glowing softly behind him like satisfied jurors. Wolfe, I said, settling across from him, you could have handed Feld over days ago. Yes, Wolfe agreed. So why wait? Wolfe sipped his beer. Because truth without structure collapses. Feld was the murderer. Sorrel was the shield. Ribach was the distraction. The embassy was the illusion. And the motive? I asked. Wolfe's eyes were tired now. Human. Profit, he said simply. Always profit. Nations lie for power. Men lie for money. I nodded. And immunity? Is a belief, Wolfe said. Like any other mirage. It disappears when examined closely. Outside, New York hummed, taxis, voices, lives continuing as if men didn't disappear and reappear every day under new names. Wolfe closed his eyes. Archie, he said, tomorrow we return to routine. I smiled. Orchids. Beer. Lunch. Order, Wolfe said. Is not optional. I looked around the brownstone, the desk cleared, the air clean, the orchids glowing quietly in their cages of glass and wire. Another illusion shattered. Another truth filed properly. And for once, diplomatic immunity had met something stronger than power. It had met Nero Wolfe's intellect. And lost.